Have you ever seen something that you can't explain, but you know happened? Something where the absurd, the irrational, is paradoxically the only plausible explanation? Hello everyone, my name is Connor Payne, and in this video, I will be discussing the basics of Memorates, utilizing this concept to analyze a story, and the value of this concept in the broader realm of narratives. Before we begin, I'm going to assume that you, the viewer, have at least a fundamental understanding of folklore in the academic sense. I will be providing a brief overview of folklore, but I encourage you to expand your knowledge beyond what I discuss in this video. The field of folklore has many definitions. For our purposes, folklore is a system for the identification, classification, and analysis of traditional, creative, and expressive practices. We will be focusing on verbal folklore, which pertains to the practices composed of words, think oral literature, and storytelling. Within verbal folklore, there are many genres which we usually define by the subject matter, setting, and truth. Truth, in this case, is how the storyteller and the audience views the story, and not if the events really happened. For example, legends are stories about questionable events, set in our world in the relatively recent past, who is entertained as true, but can be debated. Another key thing with legends is that they happen to people who are not the storyteller. Memorates are similar to legends in setting, time, and subject matter. They differ in that memorates are personal experiences of the storyteller about the supernatural, and the truth of the story is not so significant as the honesty. The storyteller must in themselves believe the events and their interpretation of them is true. This honesty, this belief that something supernatural occurred, is an important part of memorates, as it creates a form of conflict for the storyteller. How can we, as rational and logical thinkers, believe in something with no concrete evidence? Would someone then be irrational if they believe in something that can't be proven? One could argue that rationalism, the view that all that can be known is derived from evidence, and being irrational, acting within reason, are not the same. Perfectly sane people can believe in things with no evidence at all. Regardless of how you slice it, this conflict between wanting to be rational and the explanation is something that cannot be proven greatly influences memorates. It creates intimacy between the teller and the audience, as the teller risks being seen as irrational, unintelligent, or strange by the audience. It also creates what we call the narrative witness stand, whereby the teller takes the role of witness and prosecutor in telling. They present alternate, more realistic explanations, but also why these explanations don't work. We can see that as an effort by the teller to demonstrate their logic and prove that they are rational and show that they are not crazy, but crazy is the only thing that makes sense. Another part of memorates is fear. Fear is a primordial force and is a key factor in shaping humanity. Memorates, like other genres, emerge at sites of fear. I would argue that fear of the unknown is one of the largest contributors. It is this fear that we don't know why, that we can't explain why, that we don't know how people will see us, that drives not only the conflict of the narrative witness stand, but also why we tell the story to begin with, to share what we know and to seek out sympathy. The fear of change is also a major contributor to memorates. For better or for worse, humans are creatures of habit and routine. They make our lives easier. We have faith in the routine. We trust that things will always be the way they are, and that things will always behave how we expect them to. When something happens, something we don't expect to happen, it changes us. It breaks the image of how things are. It changes our model of the world, and that is scary. And if something is going to change, it better have changed for a reason. And we can see this influence of the fear of change on the narrative witness stand, which provides another explanation for why it's in memorates. The major part of the story of a memorate is the experience of an impossibility, something that could not or should not have happened. This impossibility could be many things: the untimely death of a loved one, the differing behavior of something reliable, things moving without being touched, so on and so forth. Experiencing this fundamentally changes the world for the teller because it forces them to change what they think they know is possible. The teller is more likely to try and justify this impossibility that they know happened with another impossibility. After all, if this thing could happen, then why not another unlikely event be the cause of it? The best way to learn things is through demonstration, so we will now listen to a memorate as told by my mother.
Hi, I am Cynthia Payne. I have only had one experience that I could say is a ghost story, a ghost experience. When I was 12 years old, my older brother was living in Ontario and was killed by a drunk driver. A couple of days later, his remains were being flown home to Newfoundland, and it was early in the morning, probably about 7:30 or so. I was in the living room, and my mom was in the kitchen, starting to make breakfast. And the back door of the house flew open and slammed shut, exactly the same way as my brother always opened and closed the door. And my mom and I both at the same time said, "He's home," because we both felt it. And there's no other explanation that we could think of. There was no wind. The door was closed and latched. Nobody had been outside in the morning yet. It wasn't loose. That was the only thing. And we found out later on that day that the time that it happened was the same time as the plane touched down in Newfoundland.
In this story, we can identify two major events: the unthinkable change caused by the loss of my Uncle David, and the impossibility of the door opening and slamming shut by itself. Both of these events concretely happen. There is no denying that. We can see how the narrative witness stand discusses and is shaped by these events. Starting from, there's no other explanation that we could think of, there are successive alternate explanations and dismissals. The wind might have caught the door, but it was a calm day. Someone outside might have opened the door and then closed it, but no one was outside that day. Besides the point, the door was firmly closed, and let me tell you, that door won't open sometimes, even if you do want it. The final explanation is that David himself did it, as he had returned to the island at the same time the door was slammed. This final explanation is the only explanation that Cynthia could have arrived at, because despite its lack of provability, it's the only conclusion that doesn't have definitive proof against it. Now, this is all well and good, but you may be asking yourself, what's the point? Isn't this analysis for the sake of analysis? Well, Memorates as a concept allow us to recognize and identify the conflict in ourselves caused by societal expectation, and in doing so, confront the society that demands we abandon harmless beliefs in things that are improvable. A society that would make you feel scared to discuss something that happened to you because you can't explain it. Memorates also demonstrate how fear guides us, shapes us, and our stories. Fear is a tool from our ancestors. Those who were scared got to live another day. Fear keeps us from dying, and it's okay to be scared. Being scared means you're alive. But it's just as important to see how it moves ourselves and others, because ghost stories aren't the only thing driven by fear. The Cold War was driven by fear. The AIDS scare that led to the stigmatization and mistreatment of countless people was driven by fear. And both of these were fueled by the fear-filled narratives and stories that people told. From this video, if nothing else, remember that the stories we tell are shaped by both our experiences, our fears, and the standards of our societies. I would like to thank Dr. Gordon and Dr. Peretti of Memorial University, whose lectures on folklore I based this video off of and who introduced me to this field of study. That concludes this video. Thanks for watching.